This is First Coast Math Clinic with Lesson 1, Adding Integers, from Unit 1, Number Operations, with an Algebra and Pre-algebra focus. So the goal in this video is to identify and apply rules for adding integers. So just a quick review on integers. So integers are positive and negative whole numbers. And if you want a more in-depth review of types of numbers like integers, or whole numbers, you can check out the link for the video that's going to come up right now. I do a larger review on number classifications and types of numbers, but let's just do a quick review on what integers are. So if we have our number line, let's start with 0 in the middle. We've got our positive values to the right, negative values to the left. So integers are our first introduction to negative values. So our positive values, we'll start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And our negative values, we're going to have the negative representation of, or negative equivalent of these values. So let's do -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and -6. So you may notice we have just kind of our positive and negative values. What we don't have here are decimals or fractions. So we're leaving out decimals and fractions when we talk about integers, okay? So we're going to get into some of our rules for adding our integers, our positive and negative numbers. So let's get into some examples. Okay, so when we're adding integers, there's basically two types of examples that we can work with. The first type of example is if our numbers have the same sign, right? So if we have the same sign, our rule is going to be we're going to add our values and keep the sign, okay? So what do those look like? Well, they're going to look something like this, right? We've got -5 plus -4, or -12 plus -6. So let's think of some ways that we can visualize this, right? So -5 and -4, well, let's use some minus signs to represent these numbers, right? So -5, let's write out just 5 negative signs. And then we've got +4 negative signs. Well, if we put this together, how many negative signs do we have? We've got a total of 9 negative signs. So this is going to be -9. All right, so we're adding our two numbers, 5 and 4, and we're keeping that negative sign. So we can represent this using kind of some manipulatives, using just our negative signs and just representing it visually. Here we've got -12 plus -6. All right, we know that if we add 12 and 6, we're going to get 18. If we add and keep the sign, we're going to get -18. If we want to represent this on a number line, so if you want a visual representation of what's happening, right, well, we're starting at 0. We're going 12 units into the negative. 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 12. So -12. So that takes us -12 units. Then we're going another -6 units, so adding in -6 units. So think about like we're spending $12, then we're spending $6. So we're going to go another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we go 12 units into the negative and then 6 more units into the negative. Where do we wind up? We wind up right here. This is -18. All right, so two different ways that we could represent this using some negative signs or on our number line. All right, so our second type of example is we can have either the same signs or we can have opposite signs. So if we have opposite signs, it's going to be a little bit more complex. We're going to have to subtract our values, then take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. So we talked about, I have another video on absolute value. So there's a link for that that's coming up right now if you want to check out that as a quick review, but we'll go through that also. So we're going to do two things. We're going to subtract our values and we're going to take the sign of the number with a larger absolute value. So what do these look like if we have opposite signs? Well, it looks something like this, right? So we've got -5 plus 2, or 4 plus -6. So let's start this. And We're going to start just by ignoring our signs, right? Because the first thing we want to do is subtract the values. So let's do that. Let's do 5 minus 2, and we get 3. Okay, so we know our number value is going to be 3. Now we have to figure out, well, what is our sign going to be? Is our sign going to be positive or negative? So next thing we're going to do is take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. Well, what is our absolute value of negative 5? Remember, absolute value is just the number's distance from 0. That absolute value is 5. What is the absolute value of 2? That absolute value is 2. Well, which of these numbers has a larger absolute value? Well, it's this, that negative 5 has a larger absolute value, right? So our sign is going to wind up being negative. So the answer here is going to be negative 3. All right, if we want to think about this on a number line, again, a couple ways we can think about this. We want to think about this on a number line. We start at 0. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units into the negative. Actually, let me do it this way. Do some red. So we're going to go 5 units into the negative. So we're at negative 5. And then we're adding back a positive 2. So we're going to go 2 units into the positive. So we're going to go back 1, 2. And where do we wind up? We wind up at negative 3. Okay. Think about this one other way, right? We can use negative and positive signs to represent this. So I have negative 5 plus 2. I want to show you guys a couple different ways to represent this. So negative 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Positive 2, we've got 1, 2 plus signs. Well, the negatives and positives are going to cancel each other out. So we'll cancel out a negative and a positive and a positive. What do we have left? We've got 3 negatives. So it's going to be negative 3. So we did this 3 different ways, right? We followed our rules. We used the number line. And we used our positive and negatives, right? So let's do that here. Let's subtract our values. So we've got 4 plus negative 6. Let's start by just subtracting our values. Well, what's the difference between 4 and 6? Difference is 2. Now I want the absolute value of my numbers. Absolute value of 4 is 4. Absolute value of negative 6 is 6. Well, which of these two numbers has a larger absolute value? The absolute value of negative 6 is larger, right? So the sign of our answer should be negative, so this is going to be a negative 2. Well, let's represent this a couple different ways. Let's do this on a number line. So starting at 0, we're going to go 4 units into the positive. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put some tick marks, so we're going to go back in the negative as well. So that's positive, that's negative. And I'll use green for positive. So we're going to go 4 units in the positive. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're at 4 now. But now we've got to add and go 6 units back into the negative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where do we wind up? Negative 1, negative 2. Let's also just squeeze this in right here. Let's use our plus and minus signs. So 4 plus negative 6. So 4. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's cancel out our positive and negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got 2 negatives left over, right? So again, 3 different ways that we could do this, kind of using the general rule that we have, and then visually representing this on a number line and with our plus and minuses, right? So the rule is basically just a way to mentally figure out what our sign is going to be. You're not going to, every time you do these operations, find your absolute value. It's just a way when you're starting this to keep track of what your sign should be. The more you practice this, the easier it's going to get when it's a kind of do your subtraction and realize, oh, that negative 6 is further away from 0 than the 4, so my sign here has to be negative. Okay? Let's do a couple more examples. So for number 5, we've got negative 15 plus negative 12, so we're adding two numbers of the same sign. So we want to basically just add up our two numbers, so 15 plus 12 is going to give us 27, and keep our sign. So we're going to get negative 27 here. And number 6, we've got negative 18 plus 22. So we're adding two numbers of opposite signs. So we want to subtract. And then take the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. And remember, our absolute value is a number's distance from 0. So which of these two numbers, negative 18 or 22, is further from 0? Well, negative 18 is 18 units, 22 is 22 units away from 0, so that 22 is further from 0, so our sign here is going to be positive, so our answer should be positive 4. Okay. Again, think about what this will look like on a number line, or if we start at 0, positive on the right, negative on the left. We're going to go 18 units into the negative. I'm not going to draw it all 18 tick marks. I'm just going to kind of estimate. So it's going to take us 18 units into the negative. Then we're going to go back 22 units into the positive. And then we go back 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to wind up at positive 4. And we go back a positive 22. Okay. So understanding the rules for adding integers is really important because to be able to subtract integers, you're going to change your subtracting integers to addition properties. So it's really important that you understand these rules for adding integers. So if you're struggling with these, just go through the video a little bit, do some practice, just go through it a couple times, you'll get it. Just keep working on it. If you like this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. First Coast Math Clinic.